With 60% of Coachella tickets being financed and car sales rising due to the fear of tariffs, it's been a wild week. So with this much happening in the market, I want to start a new series where I update you weekly on what's going on in the Arizona housing market. And there's a lot happening that might be a bit scary, so stay tuned to the end. To start, I want to introduce the tool we'll be using and its historical significance. Let's set the stage with the Cromford Report. What is the Cromford Report? The Cromford Report provides detailed information to track the history and current status of the greater Phoenix residential retail resale market. Say that 10 times fast. Founded by Michael Orr with the help from Tina Tambor, the Cromford Report began collecting data in 2004, analyzing and preparing charts directly from the Arizona Regional MLS. Why is the Cromford Report native to Arizona? Michael was born in England, so if he were to start a project like this in the United States, he could have gone anywhere. So why Arizona? Firstly, the amount paid for a house is public information, while many other states keep this a secret. And not only the price, but the payment, the financing, the down payment, everything. There is a lot of public information, whether you like it or not. On top of this, Arizona is one of the highest volume transaction states in the nation. With all this, it also births institutional buyers. For better or worse, Opendoor, OfferPad, and Zillow Offers, when it was still around, all started in Arizona. Arizona is the hotspot where all the chaos happens, a way less cooler version of the Wild West. So with all that being said, Arizona is seen as a bellwether market, meaning when Phoenix trends shift, other markets often follow, making it the perfect storm for Michael Orr. Hey, real quick, if you're looking to buy or sell in Arizona, my team and I would love to help. There's gonna be a bunch of information in this video. Hopefully that proves to you that I kind of know what I'm talking about. If you're interested in working with us or have any questions about real estate, make sure you use the contact information below. Historical accuracy. The Cromford Report wears many hats when it comes to collecting data. You can find closed listing data, foreclosure information, chains and concessions, inventory levels, everything you can imagine that involves being a home and selling one. But believe it or not, with all that information, what's the main attraction? Well, it's the Cromford Market Index. This is Michael and Tina's index that helps indicate where a market is heading. It balances supply and demand and where the market is headed for both buyers and sellers alike. Using their scale, 100 would be considered a fairly balanced market, with anything above that leaning towards the sellers and anything below that leaning towards the buyer's market. The further it goes on either end, the more extreme the market shift. It's meant to give a very early signal of change in the market, primarily focused on the supply and demand, aka math. For example, in the peak of 2020, the index estimated that the market was 511 on the scale, and if you're local to Arizona, you certainly felt that. We only had 2 weeks of inventory on the market, and every home had multiple offers, and the world had gone mad. How accurate is the Cromford Report? The data is 100% accurate. It's a lag measure. Its index is where we want to focus here. This is where we can see the market predictions. If it's no good, then what's the point? For our test, I want to review the 2007 to 2012 window and the 2019 to 2022 window. When looking at the Cromford Index historical graph, we can see that the seller's market peaked towards the end of 2004. The index predicted that as the year 2005 would come to a close, the market would have hit a wall, even dropping below 50 on his scale. And this is coming down from 300 plus, which is a pretty drastic prediction change. Most of the dip was caused by interest-only loans, no doc loans, and subprime mortgages in combination with flip culture and the fear of missing out on a great deal. Do you wanna make money and it's gonna be quick and easy? Buy real estate, woohoo!
Whoa!
The worst part about all of this is it sounds very similar to the market we have today, especially back in 2022. When we overlay the fact-based aftermath onto the CMI, this is what we see. Starting with the first graph, which is going to display listing success rate, a percentage based on how many active listings actually closed, we can see that more and more listings began to fall after June of 2005. Home prices had gone too far, rental yields dropped, appreciation slowed, and investors stopped buying. The median home price also rose far too fast for wages to keep up. Many buyers who wanted to participate in the market could no longer afford to, but sellers, coming off a white-hot market just 6 months earlier, were not ready to accept that. Again, does that sound a little familiar? In 2005, approximately 28% of home purchases were for investment's sake. Another 12% were for vacation. So nearly 40% were not intended for primary use, and 66% of those investors financed through loans. By 2006, 45% of mortgages were originated by investors. If only we had a crystal ball back then, huh? Now back to the graphs. If we overlay the notice of trustee sales, this shows us that listings began to fail. More and more of those were turned to foreclosure. Buyers were getting home loans with no proof that they could actually afford it. Then months later, they couldn't sell it for a profit, and when the mortgage came due, they were forced to turn it back to the bank. So you're telling me, this guy who said, "Trust me, bro," didn't actually have the money? You're kidding me.
What?
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 So assuming these buyers had no way of getting caught up on the mortgage, these were going to be sold at an auction or end up as REOs. And if we now add annual sales rate into the mix, we can see that this makes sense. From notice to REO, this process can take months. Seeing a peak of foreclosure notices in early 2009, these start to be sold off in 2010 and 2011. And with this, the market starts to bounce back. So with all that being said, what the CMI predicts ends up being pretty close to what actually happens. The timing is not perfect, but it's pretty damn close. They believe the market would crash just months before listings began to cancel and eventually kick off the rebirth of the Phoenix market. But that was just 2004 to 2014. Let's take a quick look between 2018 and 2025 where we are today. Here we have the COVID pandemic matched with record low mortgage rates, institutional buyers entering the market, and what is known as the hottest selling market in the history of Arizona real estate. At the beginning of 2020, the CMI predicted the market would take a dip based on a speculation and uncertainty of what the pandemic would do to the country. Outside of knowing that we all need to immediately go and buy 200 tons of toilet paper, a lot was up in the air. Then as we had more information and became publicly available, you can see that spiked well over 500. Insanity. At one point, we only had 2 weeks of inventory. And the graphs overlay to match the predictions, an increase in annual transactions, and there's virtually zero notices of trustee sale from 2020 to 2021. I say all that to say this. The index is one of the most accurate tools in the nation, and depending on your perspective, we are extremely lucky or unlucky to have it in our own backyard. Now for the 2025 market update as of April 18th. One thing that makes predictions incredibly hard is the current tariff situation. This is going to affect pricing, supply through builders, demand through mortgage rates, with the Fed being unable to balance these and their current roadmap, as well as wildcards like Canadians deciding to leave Arizona. So far, there has been an increase of 268% of homes being sold with a Canadian mailing address. The volume is still generally low, regardless of the high percentage, but it is something to watch. If you're curious about the snowbird situation or tariffs and how that could affect Arizona, those videos will be linked below, and you can also find them on the channel. Okay, so now let's dig deeper into the charts themselves. The first thing I want to go over is the actual CMI, the Cromford Market Index. So if we come here, currently as we sit today, I'm recording this on April 18th. The supply index is 104. The market index is 78.6, and the demand index is 81.9. So what this means is supply is in a pretty balanced spot, being just around 100. The market index being below 100 and below 90, this means that it's shifting across the valley to be a buyer's market. There's different pockets, which we'll show you in a second, but as a whole, Arizona is currently a buyer's market, which is crazy to say, considering we all lived through the 2020 insanity that was only sellers and you couldn't even imagine to buy a home. And the reason why that this is mainly down is right here, the demand index. So this one is only at an 81.9, meaning there's just less people out there searching. It's not necessarily dropping overnight, but you're seeing steadily, day after day, it's continuing to drop a few points. Okay, so this is Arizona as a whole, but now let's go and look at some specific markets. Let's start with something like Gilbert. So for right now, Gilbert is 108.4. This is very different from what the Arizona market is entirely. So they're a little more balanced and just barely shifting over into a seller's market. This is because even though demand is lower, the supply is still low. There's not a ton of homes in Gilbert. If we go look somewhere like Tempe, for example, you'll see that this is kind of a similar situation. Their supply, they're starting to get a little bit more supply. If it goes around 100, I know this will drop. The demand is still lower, but they're again above the average. But now, if we go and look at a place like, I don't know, Maricopa, a little bit more out there in the West Valley, this is very different. This tells a very different story. There is a ton of homes. There is not a lot of demand, so the market is a 51. If you're looking to buy a home in Maricopa, you have almost all the power in the world. I mean, 51 is near 2008 recession levels. And this is not any reason to fear or for panic, but this is just showing you that every market in Arizona is a little different. It's a little pockety. Chandler's a 133, so this is one of the strongest markets right now in the valley. This is, again, very limited supply, even though there's still less demand. So what's interesting is those gauges are showing what we're seeing today. Those update every single day, but we have no idea. Is 133 good compared to what it was 2 months ago? If it was at 250, probably not. That means it's dropping pretty drastically. So what we go here is go to the Cromford Market Index, and this is actually going to be by date. So if we pull up, right now we have, so I'm going to add 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025. The reason why I did that is 22 around, remember, March or so, this is when the rates started to increase. So you can see that we were at a 471. This was insanely skewed towards the sellers. And then the rates increased and it brought it right back down. I mean, it ended the year at a 94.7. So for perspective, when the market essentially tanked, that's where we're still sitting today, except now we're even lower. So we started the year at 90 and we're slowly shimming our way down to 79. It's a gradual change. It's not nearly as drastic as this, but it's still going down. So now if we go by city, right now what we're seeing in Gilbert is we were at 132, but now we're at 108. So we are dropping. Let's go back to Chandler, which was one of our strongest areas. We were at a 161 earlier in the year, and now we're at a 133. So it's seeing some pretty dramatic change. And then let's look at Maricopa. When the market's already that much of a buyer, you can't really go that much lower. So it dropped to 47, but it's kind of picking its way back up. You'll see though, at one point in 2023, it was 116. So even after the massive drop that we saw in 22, it picked itself up a little bit, and now we're back down here. So across the board, the market had tanked in 2022, had picked itself up a little bit in 23 and 24, but we're back down now in 25. It's becoming more and more of a buyer-focused market. And the way that you can really tell that is if we go and look at seller concessions. So this one is interesting because when you're in the market in 2020 and 2021, the only concessions you're going to get is if you can just barely weasel your way out some in an inspection period. Hey man, I know you had 12 offers, but we're already this deep. Let's just, give me $3,000 and let's get this thing to the finish line. You can see here, seller concessions at closing, even in 2020, 2022. I mean, see what I mean? There's a couple $1,000. It's happening. It's only happening on, at this point, 10% of transactions, which is not insanely high, but you could squeeze some out. But now, look at us today. So if we go all data that the Cromford report has on this specific chart back to 2008, we are at some of the highest amount of seller concessions paid ever in all of history of this data. We're going back to, in August of 2024, 56% of transactions had seller concessions, with the average being 10,000. Today, it's dropped slightly to 48, but it's still 10,000 average concessions. And a lot of the offers that we're getting on our listings, they're actually asking for 10,000. So anecdotally, I can tell that this is something that I've at least been seeing on our end. I mean, across the board, around 50% concession. So even when the market was picking it back up, a ton of inventory, we were only around the 30s or 40s, but now we're at 50%. So if that doesn't show you that it's buyer focused, then I've got one more for you. The one that I think is the most interesting out of all of these is price cuts, because what you're seeing is a lot of sellers are going into it believing that their home is worth, let's say, $500,000 when it's a $450 home, or let's say they want $600 and it's a $550, so on and so forth. Now, what we're seeing is an absolute insane amount of price changes. So on this graph, we're going to do, let's see if we can get the last 10 years of data here. So we're looking back in 2016, pretty average, about 2,000 listings with price cuts month after month. You'll see here, back in 2020, I mean, we're back at 355 at one of the lower points. No one was doing it. Then, this is when 2022 happened, right? The rates happened in around March 21st. So we can start to see the rates cut here, and immediately 667, up to 1,000 after a month, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. So the market started to panic, and everyone started to immediately, we need to get out of this house. A lot of flippers, a lot of investors. We just need to sell because we don't know where the world's going. Then they start to bounce back. The market adjusts and it starts to shift. Things get back to normal. But here we are again, in not uncharted, but the market is getting significantly drier than we expected. We're seeing 3,700 number of listings with price cuts in March last month. And that's matching when the Fed had changed rates drastically since it had this shift here. And we also haven't heard any of the tariff news when this was happening. So these are just happening from the market adjusting itself. And if we compare that now back to 2021, 300 to 3,700. It's insanity. So the reason I believe that this is happening is a lot of people are deciding to sell in January, typically in Arizona. A lot of people decide to list their home. The market is not purchasing all these homes, so inventory is rising. People are starting to panic a little bit, but in their head, they're thinking that their home is worth more than it is. They're still not willing to accept the fact that their home is worth significantly less than it was in 2020 and 2021. So we're going to start to see, I believe this number will continue to increase, especially once we have April's data back. This is going to be probably 3 weeks from now. Now, the last chart that I want to pull up here is I mentioned that this is similar to 2014. So this is the days of inventory excluding under contract backup offers. What UCB means is it's a listing that goes pending, but they say, hey, you're still welcome to show it and we're still going to be taking backups. Typically, these listings don't fall out. It's more just so they can get backup offers, but the way that the MLS works, you're typically not going to get one anyways. Whether it's pending or UCB, it doesn't really matter, for being super honest, but I don't want to include any pending listings because these aren't active on the market. So these are anything that's active that's not UCB, this orange line is the running average. So anything above the running average is meaning it's a significant buyer's market the further it is, and then anything below means it's a significant seller's market the further it is. We can see here we have had a decade plus run of it being a seller's market. It just kept getting worse and worse and worse for buyers all the way up until it had tipping point right here. Again, when the rates increased back in 2022, we had a short moment of buyers, and now we're kind of on this run. The running average is 68.2, while we're at 120. So we're double the running average of inventory, which means we have more options for more buyers, which means more concessions, more rate buy downs, more price drops from sellers because there's other inventory in their neighborhoods. This is just meaning that it's going to be more and more of a buyer's market unless this inventory can go down or we have significant increase in demand. And right now, the Fed, they're not really sure what to do with these tariffs. So the rate decrease, which is what we would need to see more demand, is not happening. So if we have more increase of inventory and the rates don't go anywhere, it's just going to get more and more buyer focused. And if we hover here, it shows right here that we have even more at the peak. We have 129.2 days of inventory. And what that means, in case you're unclear, is days of inventory would be if not a single new home were to hit the market, how many days would it take to sell out all the homes that are currently there? After 129 days, based on our current demand, that would wipe out all of the inventory, which is not terrible. It's more than we're used to, but it's not the worst. What we saw here in 2020 was 15 days of inventory. This is 14.9. I mean, this is legit 2 weeks of inventory. If no new homes came to the market, after 2 weeks, not a single home would exist. That's crazy. So overall, as a whole, what we're seeing is more inventory with adjustments in certain markets. Sellers are paying more concessions than they have the last few years. You're also seeing more and more price cuts that are happening, and we have more inventory than that of 2014. Now, real quick, make sure to subscribe. Come on. I know you're watching it, and I know you haven't subscribed yet. My channel shows me that you're not subscribed. Almost all of you are not subscribed. Just hit the button. It does nothing. Come on, hit the button. It's free. So where does that leave us? For the most part, we are all still waiting to see how this will unfold. Small changes across the board that have continued to compound for months now are leading to a buyer-focused market in Arizona as a whole. This month, Michael Orr stated, as you can see, we currently have just over 1,400 pending foreclosures in Maricopa County, up almost 50% from last year. While this is not a problem in itself, the trend is concerning, and if the count continues to rise at this pace every month, it could start to get ominous. So in general, this is going to be one of the primary things I'll be watching for. For buyers specifically, the question might be, should you buy a house right now? In the most truthful way possible, the answer is yes, but not for the reason that you expect. If you're looking to be part of the top 1% financially, you are someone who truly understands money and wealth. You know the importance of returns and the velocity of money, then buying a home doesn't necessarily make sense today. If you're going to maximize the same money you're going to put into a home and put into a business or into a high return asset like hard money loans, then owning doesn't really make any sense. With mortgage rates where they are today, you can get a higher return in other areas and you do not need to deal with the noise of owning a home. But, this is a big but, 99% of us are not in that position and probably don't want to be. Managing money at this level is a full-time job and is guaranteed to give you gray hairs. For most, they may be interested in the idea of it, but would rather just buy some Bitcoin or Nvidia and see where things take them. And that's totally okay. Some might even say, I'll start a retirement account next week, next paycheck, next closing, whatever it may be. But that day never comes, and you won't be prepared later in life. So for 99% of people, you should purchase a home if you follow the following criteria. First is if you plan on living there for at least 5 to 7 years. This gets you through a lot of the market volatility, and if you aren't checking your home's values daily, you can largely ignore what is going on in the market. A little stress-free. Time in the market versus timing the market, blah, 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 blah. It's overused, but the statement makes sense. Next, can you afford the payment today? Don't count on a rate buy down, don't count on a refinance, just be comfortable with where it is today. And if you can get anything else as a bonus, then that's awesome, but don't let it bankrupt you. Buy something that makes sense financially. You can buy your mansion later, Luigi. Lastly, you can use me as a realtor. Kidding, but not kidding. Those first 2 rules should get you in a good spot. Real estate can be one of the greatest assets later in life and can almost guarantee you a solid retirement if you've done it correctly. So yes, buying a home isn't a bad thing for the majority of people, regardless of what the market is doing. Just understand the expectation going into it. This isn't an investment and you're not going to be printing money on it, at least for the next 5 years. And that's totally okay. And if you can't buy a home at all, that's also okay. Work on increasing your income, paying down debts, and just rent it out for a few years. It'll be all right. So what should you expect in this market? If you want a deal, be comfortable making aggressive offers, something low with concessions, and also be comfortable making multiple offers. You may lose a couple deals, but if you want a good deal, it will take patience. You can also expect more inventory to hit the market and more possibilities to open up as we hit the summer months. Typically, April is one of Arizona's strongest months, but according to the data, a slowdown has happened far earlier than expected. So we'll see where this takes us, but understand that more is on the horizon. And lastly, regardless of what your realtor friends are posting on Instagram, do not expect the rates to drop significantly anytime soon. Buckle up. Now, should you be buying rentals right now? Unless you are in a multifamily or have a deep discount on the property, and you pair that with paying all cash, I would not do it. Ideally, you can do all three at once if you're going to do it at all. If not, and you finance the purchase, you are likely going to make a 6% cap rate on a 7% mortgage that doesn't make any sense, even if you make it up in volume. Believe it or not, if you lose money on every rental, but you have 10 of them, all you do is lose more money. I know, I was shocked too the first time I heard that. Now, for sellers, should you sell right now? This is a more nuanced question that's hard to give a black or white answer to. Why are you selling? Do you have to sell? What is your current mortgage rate? What does your financial situation look like? Will there be a heavy tax bill? Where are you even moving to begin with? So first, solve these sort of questions and talk with a realtor who knows what they're doing. Again, you should already be talking to me. I don't even know what you're doing at this point. What should you expect when selling a house, regardless of who it's with? The major point here is don't shoot the messenger. I'm just giving you realistic expectations. In 2014, we saw nearly identical conditions: growing inventory, stubborn sellers, and buyers regaining the upper hand. The people who recognized it early were able to make a smart decision. They were able to move and get out ahead. Today is looking like a similar moment in time. The price you think you can get, you are unlikely to get. Zillow has predicted some freaking crazy things in their algorithm. And there's a reason they are no longer in the business of buying homes. Research that one. Anything that is sold around you in the last 6 months expects to lose 5% when you go to sell. Expect to pay concessions. If you don't price correctly from the start, expect to sit on the market. If you price correctly, you may be able to get multiple offers. I mostly work on listings, so I have some personal anecdotes here. Just this month, we got one property under contract over ask with multiple offers, while another one closed underneath ask with 1% concessions on top. Which, by the way, concessions is an important point here. When you're scrolling through Zillow or Redfin, Zillow is the best, by the way. I hate to break it to you, Sabrina, but we can all agree that anything but Realtor.com will do. I think that's a fair point. You won't see concessions. I comped a house today that was worth $335,000, but then I realized when I was going off that model match, it had to pay $8,000 in concessions to the buyer. So in reality, that's a $327,000 house before taking a 5% discount because that sold back in January. And I do have a quick rant that will be more and more relevant as this market starts to shift. One misconception since 2020 is that every time you buy a house, you make money. The same thing happened in 2004. For the most part in history, home prices have increased, but that doesn't mean your net profit will. There are fees. A lot of times, especially in this kind of market, the buyer will get concessions to cover the closing costs they have outside of the down payment. This can be through the offer or the inspection period. For the down payment, they can get that back when they sell their home, so that part is kind of irrelevant. The point being, the buyers have somewhat low cost of entry when it comes to buying a home. But as the great philosopher Justin Timberlake states, what goes around comes back around. I thought I told ya. Sorry, I got carried away. But what goes around comes back around. You save a bunch of money when you buy, so where do you think that comes from? The selling side, of course. The seller has closing costs. Sometimes they even cover the HOA dues and transfer fees. In this market especially, they don't have as much bargaining power to get any of their closing costs covered. So they might be paying both sides, and there's title fees, and there's commissions, and there's inspection costs, because homes wear down and things are likely to go bad. That's just how the real world works. For commissions, yes, technically the buyer is paying commissions, but it is baked into the sales price, and it could, very likely, happen the exact same way when you go to sell. You essentially get a freebie on the buy side, but it comes back to you when you go to sell. It all evens out in the end. And personally, I'd rather pay commissions through proceeds so I get taxed less than pay out of pocket when I'm going to buy a home. I don't know, you tell me. So my point is, if you buy a home for $450,000, when you go to sell that home, even if it sells for the exact same price, you're only going to walk away with 92% of that. So day trading houses is not really a smart plan. This is why I say you need to live there for at least 5 to 7 years minimum. Since we flip houses, we get asked for cash offers all the time, and sellers try this move constantly. Well, I think it's worth $450,000, but I would take $414,000 with no fees, no closing costs, and no commissions. Yeah, no shit, buddy. $450K minus fees is $414K. You are just so generous, thank you. So we should give you an all-price, full market offer. Mind you, this house has dog poop and holes in the walls. The reality of the market has not yet set in for most flippers and most sellers willing to buy these homes at the prices that will soon fall off. Anyways, that's my rant. For a very brief recap, sellers need to adjust expectations if they want to sell as the market continues to trend downwards in a buyer's market. This is very similar to the one we saw in 2014 after the recession. Real estate has always been an emotional purchase, but if you just trust the math, trust the data, and stay honest with what's really happening around you, you will be ahead of the curve. That's what this is all about. We can't control the market, but we can control how we position ourselves in it. With the right team, you will always be taken care of. Again, come on. You should be using me as your realtor. If any of this information was helpful, make sure to subscribe. And if you're looking to buy or sell in Arizona, make sure you reach out using the information below. I'd love to help. All right, see you next week for the next market update.